I watched my daughter-in-law heave a leather suitcase into the lake and speed away without so much as a glance in the rearview mirror. I fought my way to the shore, struggling against the sucking mud of the bank, and wrestled the waterlogged suitcase out of the lake. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. That's when I heard it. A faint, muffled noise coming from inside. "Please God, please don't let it be what I think it is," I whispered, my trembling fingers fumbling with the soaking wet zipper. It was stuck fast but finally gave way. In that instant my heart just stopped dead. What I saw inside chilled me to the very core. A feeling I hadn't experienced in all my 63 years. My name is Eleanor, but everyone calls me Ellie Whitlock. I'm 63 years old, and I've been living all alone ever since I buried my only child Marcus 8 long months ago. Our house, nestled right by the shore of Lake Juniper in rural Georgia, used to be brimming with laughter and wonderful memories. Now it felt way too big, way too quiet. That afternoon in September, I was out on the back porch, sipping my sweet tea, when something caught my eye. The silver sedan that belonged to Sloane, my daughter-in-law, came barreling down the dirt road, kicking up a thick cloud of dust behind her. She was driving like a total maniac, way too fast for that winding road. Something was terribly wrong, I just knew it. I set my mug down on the porch railing and squinted to get a better look. Sloane slammed on the brakes right at the water's edge, leaving the engine running. She jumped out of the car like the devil himself was hot on her heels. Her face was beet red, and her hair was a complete mess. She yanked the trunk open so violently, I thought she was going to rip the door clean off its hinges. That's when I saw the suitcase. That brown leather suitcase that I'd given her myself the day she married Marcus. "To carry your dreams wherever you go," I told her then, thinking about how foolish I'd been. Sloane dragged the bag out. It was heavy, no doubt about it. I could tell by the way her body strained, the way her arms trembled under the weight. She glanced around, looking nervous, looking guilty as sin. I'll never forget that look on her face. "Sloane!" I yelled from the porch, but she didn't hear me, or at least she pretended not to. She walked right to the water's edge. Every step seemed like a real struggle, as if she were carrying not just a physical weight, but a terrible emotional burden as well. She swung the suitcase once, twice, and then on the third heave she launched it out into the water. The splash shattered the peace and quiet of the afternoon. The bag floated for a moment before starting its slow, dreadful descent into the depths. Sloane turned and bolted back to the car. The engine roared to life, the tires squealed on the gravel, and she was gone, vanished down the dirt road, leaving nothing behind but swirling dust and a heavy, suffocating silence. I stood there paralyzed for a few seconds, just trying to process what I had just seen. Sloane, the suitcase, the lake, the pure desperation in her movements. A shiver ran down my spine even though it was a hot afternoon. My legs started moving almost before my mind could fully understand what was happening. I ran down the porch steps, across the yard, and onto the muddy bank. The lake was only about 300 feet away. I ran like I hadn't run in years, my knees protesting with every step, my chest burning, but I didn't stop for a second. When I finally reached the shore, I was gasping for breath, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The suitcase was still there, floating for the moment, slowly starting to sink below the surface. The leather was soaked, dark, and heavy. Without even thinking, I waded into the water. The lake was cold, much colder than I had expected it to be. It reached my knees, then my waist. The bottom mud sucked at my feet, threatening to pull me under. I reached out, grabbed one of the handles, and pulled with all my might. It was incredibly heavy, much heavier than it should have been. I yanked harder, my arms shaking from the sheer effort. Water splashed into my face, and my clothes were completely soaked. Finally, I managed to drag the suitcase toward the bank. That's when I heard the sound again, a weak, muffled cry coming from inside the bag. My blood ran cold in my veins. No, it just couldn't be. "Please God, please don't let it be what I think," I pleaded, my voice trembling. I pulled even faster, driven now by pure, unadulterated panic. I hauled the suitcase up onto the wet sand and fell to my knees beside it. My hands fumbled for the zipper. It was jammed tight, wet, and slightly rusted. My fingers kept slipping on the slick metal. Come on. Come on, I muttered through gritted teeth, pushing past the pain in my fingers. Tears started to blur my vision. I forced the zipper once, twice, and finally with a screech it gave way. I lifted the lid and the whole world seemed to just stop. My heart stopped beating. The air was trapped in my throat. My hands flew to my mouth to stifle the scream that was building inside me. There, wrapped in a soaking wet powder blue blanket, was a baby, a newborn, so tiny, so fragile, so utterly still. His lips were blue, his skin pale as wax, and his eyes were closed. He wasn't moving at all. Oh my God. Oh my God. No, I choked out. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold him. I lifted him out of the suitcase with a tenderness I didn't even know I still possessed. He was cold, so cold to the touch. He weighed less than a bag of sand. His tiny head fit perfectly in the palm of my hand. His umbilical cord was still tied off with a piece of ordinary twine, not a medical clamp, as if someone had done this at home in secret, without any help whatsoever. No, 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 I whispered over and over like a broken record. I pressed my ear to his chest, straining to hear something, anything. Silence, nothing. I pressed my cheek against his nose, and then I felt the faintest puff of air, so weak I thought I'd imagined it, but it was there. He was barely breathing, but he was breathing. I scrambled to my feet, clutching the baby tightly to my chest. My legs nearly buckled beneath me. I ran toward the house faster than I'd ever run in my entire life. Water streamed from my clothes. My bare feet were cut and bleeding on the rough path, but I felt no pain, only terror, only urgency. Only the desperate need to save the tiny life that was trembling against me. I burst into the house screaming at the top of my lungs. I don't even know what I was yelling. Maybe help. Maybe Jesus. Maybe just nothing coherent at all. I grabbed the kitchen phone with one hand, still holding the baby tight with the other. I dialed 911. My fingers slipped on the keys, slick with water and adrenaline. The phone almost dropped twice. 911, what is your emergency? A calm female voice asked on the other end of the line. Baby, I found a baby in the lake. He's not responding. He's cold. He's blue. Please, please send help. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Tell me your address. I stammered out my address near Lake Juniper, my voice shaking uncontrollably. The operator instructed me to place the baby on a flat surface. I swept everything off the kitchen table with one arm. Dishes, papers, everything crashed to the floor in a noisy heap. Nothing mattered but that child in my arms. I placed the baby gently on the table. So small, so fragile, so still. Is he breathing? I shrieked at the operator, my voice a high, unrecognizable sound. You tell me. Look at his chest. Is it moving? I looked closely, searching desperately for a nearly imperceptible movement. It was so subtle I had to lean in close to see it. Yes, I think so. Very shallow. Okay, listen closely. I'm going to guide you. I need you to get a clean towel and dry the baby very gently. Then wrap him up to keep him warm. The ambulance is already on the way. I did as I was told, moving on pure instinct. I grabbed towels from the bathroom. I dried his tiny body with clumsy, desperate motions, trying to be gentle but fighting the urge to rush. Every second felt like an eternity. I wrapped the baby tightly in clean towels. I picked him up again, cradling him against my chest like he was the most precious thing in the world. I began to rock him without even realizing it. A deep, ancient instinct I thought I'd long forgotten rising to the surface. Hold on, little one, I whispered soothingly. Please hold on. They're coming. They're coming to help you. The minutes that followed until the ambulance finally arrived were the longest of my life. I sat on the kitchen floor with the baby pressed tightly to my chest, trying to share my own warmth with his freezing body. I sang to him. I don't even know what I sang. Maybe the same lullaby I used to sing to Marcus when he was small. Maybe just senseless sounds and comforting noises. I just needed him to know he wasn't alone. That someone was holding him. That someone wanted him to live. The sirens finally tore through the silence. A welcome sound that made me want to weep with relief. Red and white lights flashed through the windows, illuminating the room in a chaotic dance. I ran to the door, throwing it open wide. 2 paramedics jumped out of the ambulance. An older man with a gray beard and a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She took the baby from my arms with an efficiency that broke my heart. A necessary detachment that I couldn't bring myself to feel. She examined him quickly, pulled out a stethoscope and listened intently. Her face was emotionless, but I saw her shoulders tense slightly. Severe hypothermia, possible aspiration, she said to her partner, her voice professional and calm. We need to move now. They placed him on a small gurney, put an oxygen mask on his face. Their hands moved fast, connecting wires, attaching monitors, doing things I didn't understand but trusted they did. The man looked at me. Are you coming with us? It wasn't really a question, more of a statement. I nodded numbly. I climbed into the ambulance, sinking into the small side seat. I couldn't stop staring at the baby, so tiny and helpless amidst all that high-tech equipment. The ambulance took off, sirens wailing. The world outside blurred past the windows in a kaleidoscope of light and color. How did you find him? The paramedic asked as she continued working on the baby, her voice still calm and professional. In a suitcase in the lake. I saw someone throw it in. She looked at me, then at her partner. I saw something flicker in her eyes. Concern, perhaps suspicion, perhaps pity. Did you see who it was? I opened my mouth, then hesitated and closed it again. Sloane, my daughter-in-law, Marcus's widow. The woman who cried at his funeral as if her world had ended. The same woman who had just tried to drown a baby. How could I say that out loud? How could I even believe it myself? Yes, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. I saw who it was. We arrived at the Atlanta Medical Center in what felt like less than 15 minutes. The emergency room doors flew open. A dozen people in white and green scrubs swarmed the gurney, their movements coordinated and urgent. They shouted numbers, medical terms, orders. They rushed the baby through a set of double doors and into the chaos beyond. I tried to follow, but a nurse stopped me firmly. Ma'am, you need to stay here. The doctors are working. We need some information from you. She led me to a small waiting room. Cream-colored walls, uncomfortable plastic chairs, the pervasive smell of disinfectant. I sat down heavily, shaking from head to toe. I didn't know if it was from the cold of my wet clothes, the shock of what had happened, or both. Probably both. The nurse sat down across from me. She was older than the paramedic, maybe my age. Her name tag read Nurse Diane. She had kind wrinkles around her eyes that suggested a lifetime of caring for others. I'm going to need you to tell me everything that happened, she said softly, her voice gentle but firm. Start from the beginning. I recounted every detail from the moment I saw Sloane's car barreling down the dirt road until I opened the suitcase and found the baby inside. Diane listened intently, taking notes on a tablet, nodding occasionally but not interrupting. When I finally finished, she sighed deeply and closed her eyes for a moment. The police will want to speak with you, she said, her voice grave. This is attempted homicide. Maybe worse. Attempted homicide. The words hung in the air like heavy, dark birds, circling ominously. My daughter-in-law, my son's wife, a murderer? I couldn't process it. I couldn't understand how things could have come to this. Diane reached across the small table and placed her hand over mine, her touch surprisingly warm and comforting. You did the right thing, she said, looking me directly in the eyes. You saved a life today, Ellie. But that wasn't how I felt. It felt like I'd uncovered something terrible. Something I couldn't just shove back into the darkness and pretend it hadn't happened. Something that would change everything forever. 2 long hours passed before a doctor finally came to speak to me. He was young, maybe 35. He had deep circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and hands that smelled strongly of antibacterial soap. The baby is stable, he said, his voice tired but professional. He's in the neonatal ICU for now. He suffered severe hypothermia and aspirated water. His lungs are compromised. The next 48 hours are critical. Is he going to live? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, broken with fear and exhaustion. I don't know, he said with brutal honesty, meeting my gaze directly. We're going to do everything we can. The police arrived half an hour later. Two officers, a woman in her 40s with her hair pulled back in a tight bun and a younger man who was constantly taking notes in a small notebook. The woman introduced herself as Detective Sergeant Ava Johnson of the Fulton County Sheriff's Department. She had dark, piercing eyes that seemed to look right through any lies or half-truths. They asked me the same questions over and over, from different angles, trying to find any inconsistencies or cracks in my story. I described Sloane's car, the exact time, Sloane's movements, the suitcase, everything I could remember, no matter how small or insignificant it seemed. Ava watched me with an intensity that made me feel oddly guilty, even though I'd done nothing wrong. "And are you absolutely sure it was your daughter-in-law you saw?" she asked, her voice flat and unwavering. "Completely sure," I said, trying to project confidence. "Completely. Do you have any idea why she would do something like that?" "No," I said, shaking my head in disbelief. "I just don't know." "Where is she now?" "I have no idea." "When was the last time you spoke with her before today?" 3 weeks ago, on the anniversary of my son's death." Ava wrote something down in her notebook. She exchanged a quick, unreadable look with her partner. "We're going to need you to come to the precinct tomorrow to make a formal statement," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "And you cannot contact Sloane under any circumstances. Do you understand?" I nodded numbly. What was I going to say to her anyway? Why did you try to kill a baby? Why did you throw him in the lake like trash? Why? The questions echoed in my mind, unanswered and unanswerable. The officers left. Diane returned to the waiting room with a warm blanket and a hot cup of tea. "You should go home. Get some rest, take a hot shower and change your clothes," she said, her voice full of concern. "You look exhausted." But I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave that baby alone in the hospital. That baby I had held against my chest, who had drawn his first tentative breath of hope in my arms. I stayed in the waiting room, clinging to the hope that he would somehow pull through. Diane, bless her heart, brought me dry clothes from the hospital storage, a set of blue nurse scrubs and a baggy t-shirt. I changed in the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I looked like I'd aged 10 years in one afternoon. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I just sat in that uncomfortable plastic chair, watching the clock tick by with agonizing slowness. Every hour I got up and went to the nurse's station to ask about the baby's condition. The nurses always gave me the same answer, their faces carefully neutral. Stable, critical, fighting. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Reverend Thomas, the priest from my church, showed up at the hospital. Someone must have called him and told him what had happened. He sat down next to me in silence, not saying anything for a long time. He was just there, a quiet, reassuring presence in the midst of my personal hell. Sometimes that's all you need, I realized, just a physical presence, proof that you're not completely alone in the darkness. "God tests us in many ways," he finally said, his voice soft and low. "This doesn't feel like a test," I replied, my voice flat and empty. "Feels like a curse." He nodded slowly, acknowledging my pain. He didn't try to offer any easy platitudes or convince me otherwise, and I appreciated that more than any sermon he could have given. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky with the first faint streaks of dawn, I knew deep in my heart that nothing would ever be the same again. I had crossed a line. I had seen something I could never unsee. Whatever came next, I would have to face it, not just for myself, but for that baby, that tiny being fighting for every breath in the next room, who had somehow become my responsibility. I hadn't chosen this path, but I knew I couldn't abandon him now. Not after pulling him from the water. Not after feeling his fragile heartbeat against mine. The dawn arrived without me even noticing. Light streamed through the waiting room windows, casting a pale orange glow over everything. I had spent the entire night in that hard plastic chair, my body stiff and aching. My back ached. My eyes burned from lack of sleep. But I couldn't bring myself to leave. Every time I closed my eyes, even for a moment, I saw the suitcase sinking into the dark water. I saw that still little body wrapped in the blue blanket. I saw the blue lips that struggled to breathe. Diane showed up at 7 o'clock in the morning with a cup of coffee and a foil-wrapped breakfast sandwich. "You need to eat something," she said gently, placing them in my hands. "You can't run on empty." I wasn't hungry at all, but I ate the sandwich anyway because she stood there waiting, her expression full of concern. The coffee was scalding hot and burned my tongue, but I swallowed it down. The sandwich tasted like cardboard, but I chewed it slowly, deliberately. I pretended to be a normal person doing normal things on a normal morning, even though my world had been irrevocably shattered. The baby is still stable, Diane said, sitting down beside me. His body temperature is rising slowly, which is a good sign, and his lungs are responding to the treatment. Can I see him? I asked, my voice full of hope. She shook her head sadly. Not yet. Immediate family only for now. And we don't even know who the family is yet. Family. The word hit me like a stone, heavy and painful. That baby had a family somewhere, a mother, Sloan, but she had tried to kill him. So who was the father? Where was he? Why hadn't anyone reported him missing? The questions piled up in my head, a chaotic jumble of unanswered fears and uncertainties. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Ava returned to the hospital. She was alone this time, her partner nowhere in sight. She sat down across from me with a thick folder in her hands. Her expression was hard, unreadable, inquisitive. She looked at me as if I were the suspect in a crime, not a grieving grandmother who had stumbled upon a tragedy. Ellie, I need to ask you a few more questions, she said, opening the folder and flipping through the pages. I already told you everything I know, I said, my voice weary. I don't know what else I can tell you. I know, but some inconsistencies have surfaced in your statement, she said, her tone suggesting she thought I was lying. Inconsistencies? The word floated between us like a silent accusation, a veiled threat. I felt my stomach clench with anxiety. What kind of inconsistencies? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Ava reached into the folder and took out a photograph, placing it on the small table between us. It was a picture of Sloane's car, the same silver sedan I had seen at the lake, but it was parked in a parking lot, not by the water's edge. This photo was taken by a security camera at a supermarket 30 minutes from here yesterday at 5:20 in the afternoon, she said, her voice flat and emotionless. 5:20 in the afternoon. 10 minutes after I had supposedly seen her at the lake, throwing the suitcase into the water. It was impossible. I looked at the photo more closely, examining every detail. It was definitely her car. I recognized the license plate, the make, and the model. But it can't be her, I thought, my mind reeling. There has to be a mistake, some kind of mix-up. I saw her, I protested, my voice sounding less and less convincing, even to my own ears. I was there. I saw her throw the suitcase into the lake. You were sure, Ava said, her eyes narrowing, but your certainty seems to have wavered somewhat. She leaned forward, her gaze intense and unwavering. Ellie, I need you to be completely honest with me, she said, her voice low and serious. What is your relationship with Sloane? Do you get along? And there it was, the real question, the one I'd been dreading since the police had first shown up at the hospital. Because the truth was, we didn't get along. We never had. From the day Marcus introduced her to me, I knew something was wrong with her. She was too perfect, too calculating, too interested in the money Marcus earned as an engineer. We're not close, I admitted reluctantly. We never have been. Do you blame her for your son's death? What? I exclaimed, my voice too loud, too defensive. What does that have to do with anything? It's a simple question, Ava said, unfazed by my outburst. Do you blame Sloane for Marcus's death? The accident. That's what everyone called it, what everyone tried to believe. Marcus was driving home late one night after having dinner with Sloane. It was raining heavily. The car skidded on the wet pavement, lost control and crashed into a tree. Marcus died instantly at the scene. Sloane walked away with only minor scratches and bruises. It always seemed strange to me, suspicious somehow. It always seemed too convenient. But I never had any real proof. Just a heartbroken mother desperately looking for someone to blame for the loss of her only child. I don't see what that has to do with the baby, I said, my voice shaking slightly. It has everything to do with it, Ava said, closing the folder with a snap. Because we haven't been able to locate Sloane. She's vanished without a trace. Her house is completely empty. Her phone is turned off. And you are the only person who claims to have seen her at the lake yesterday. Her words fell on me like ice water, chilling me to the bone. She was accusing me, not directly, but the insinuation was there, clear as day. She thought I had made the whole story up, that I had somehow found the baby and was blaming Sloane out of vengeance for Marcus's death. I didn't lie, I said, clenching my jaw in defiance. I saw what I saw. Then we need to find Sloane and we need to find her fast, Ava said, her voice tight with urgency. Because if she is this baby's mother, then he's still in grave danger. And if she's not, then we have an even bigger mystery on our hands than we thought. Ava stood up abruptly, handing me a business card with her phone number on it. If you remember anything else, anything at all, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem, call me immediately. Don't hesitate. She walked out of the waiting room, leaving me alone with more questions than answers. I sat there staring at the card in my hand, wondering if I was losing my mind. I had seen Sloane. I was absolutely sure of it. But now doubt was starting to seep into my mind like a slow-acting poison, eroding my certainty. What if I was wrong? What if it was someone else entirely? What if my grief and resentment towards Sloane had somehow made me see what I wanted to see, instead of what was actually there? Reverend Thomas came back to the hospital at noon, bringing with him a small rosary in his hands. "Shall we pray?" he asked gently, offering me a small reassuring smile. I'm not a particularly religious person, I never really have been. But in that moment I needed something bigger than myself, something to hold on to, something to tell me I wasn't completely alone in this nightmare. "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Let's pray." We prayed together quietly, the familiar words of the rosary washing over me, calming me, even if I didn't fully understand how it worked or what it meant. When we finished, I felt a little less broken, a little less lost in the darkness. "The police think I'm lying," I confided to him, my voice heavy with despair. "The truth always comes out eventually," he replied, his voice full of quiet certainty, "even if it takes time." "But we don't have time," I protested, my voice rising in panic. "That baby is fighting for his life in the ICU. And somewhere out there Sloane is hiding or running or planning her next move. We just don't have the luxury of time." At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a different doctor came to see me. An older woman this time, with thick glasses perched on her nose and a serious no-nonsense expression on her face. "We need your authorization to run some further tests on the baby," she said, her voice brusque but not unkind. "But I'm not family," I said, confused. "I have no legal right to make those decisions." "We know that, but you are the only responsible adult we can locate at the moment," she said, explaining the situation patiently. "Child Protective Services is on the way, but in the meantime we need to act quickly. The baby needs blood work done immediately. We need to know if he has any underlying medical conditions, if he was exposed to drugs or alcohol in utero, if he has any injuries we haven't yet detected. We can't wait any longer." Without hesitation, I grabbed the pen she offered and signed the papers, barely even reading them completely. I just wanted them to do whatever was necessary to save him, to give him the best possible chance at survival. 2 hours later, the social worker finally showed up at the hospital. Her name was Marcy, and she was young, far too young for that kind of emotionally demanding job, I thought to myself. Maybe 25 years old, give or take. Short, neatly styled hair, a conservative gray suit, and a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Miss Whitlock," she said, sitting down beside me in the waiting room and opening a file on her lap. "I need to ask you some questions about your current living situation and your relationship to the baby. I understand you were the one who found him." The story again, the endless repetition of the same questions, the same details, the same horrifying events. But Marcy was different from the police. She didn't look at me with suspicion or accusation. Instead, she looked at me with pity, which was somehow even worse. "Do you live alone?" she asked, her voice neutral and impersonal. "Yes," I said. "Do you have a stable source of income?" "I have my late husband's pension and some savings," I said. "It's enough to live on comfortably." "Criminal record? Any history of mental health issues? Depression? Anxiety?" I hesitated for a moment, reluctant to reveal any weakness. After Marcus died, I took antidepressants for about 3 months, I admitted. My doctor said it was normal to need some chemical help to get through that kind of grief. I stopped taking them when I started feeling better. So you were treated for depression after your son's death? She clarified, writing something down in her file. Yes, I said, but it's past now. I'm fine. Marcy wrote something else down, not looking up. The baby is going to need a temporary home when he's released from the hospital, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. If and when he is released, CPS will begin looking for certified foster families to take him in. In the meantime, he will remain in state custody. State custody. Those 2 words broke something deep inside me. A final fragile hope that I hadn't even realized I was still clinging to. That baby I had held against my chest, who had breathed his first breath of life in my arms, would be handed over to strangers, to a cold impersonal system, to people who would see him as just another file, just another case number. What if I wanted to? I started to say, the words tumbling out before I could stop them, before I could fully consider the implications of what I was suggesting. What if I wanted to care for him? Marcy looked up at me, surprised by my question, then quickly replaced her surprise with a skeptical frown. Ms. Whitlock, she said, her voice firm but gentle, you are 63 years old. You are not a certified foster parent. You have no legal relationship with the baby. And you are currently involved in an active criminal investigation related to this case. But I didn't do anything wrong, I protested, my voice rising in desperation. I saved his life. I understand that, Ms. Whitlock, she said, but the system has strict protocols that we have to follow. The best interests of the child always come first. And frankly, your age and your recent emotional situation are significant factors that we have to take into consideration when making these decisions. I felt like I'd been slapped across the face. Too old, too unstable, too emotionally broken. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was crazy to even consider it. But when I closed my eyes, all I saw was that fragile little body lying on the kitchen table, struggling to breathe, and I knew in my heart that no one else in the world would ever love him the way I. That night, after 36 hours, I finally went home. Diane had talked me into it, saying I needed a shower and a real bed. She assured me the baby would be fine and they'd call if anything changed. As the sun began to set, I drove, the lake shimmering on my right. I stopped at the very spot where I'd seen Sloan, where I'd pulled out the suitcase. I got out of the car and walked to the bank. The suitcase was gone. The police had taken it as evidence. I could still see exactly where it had been, my own footprints in the dried mud. As darkness fell, I stood there wondering if I'd ever know the truth. If Sloan was watching from somewhere, trying to figure out what the hell had really happened. Then my phone rang. It was the hospital. My heart leaped into my throat. Miss Whitlock, Diane's voice said, you need to come back now. I sped back to the hospital, ignoring every speed limit sign. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the engine. Diane hadn't given me any details, just those 3 words. Come back now. They were enough to conjure the worst scenarios. The baby had died. That had to be it. Why else would they call with such urgency? He had fought for 2 days, and finally his tiny body had given out. I hadn't been fast enough. I parked haphazardly, taking up 2 spots, and ran toward the emergency doors. Diane was waiting for me at the entrance. Her expression was serious, but there was something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. He's alive, she said immediately, as if she knew exactly what I was thinking. The baby is alive, but you have to come with me. She led me down hallways I didn't recognize, and we took an elevator to the 3rd floor, past the NICU, and kept walking. Finally, we reached a small conference room. Inside were Detective Ava, Marcy the social worker, and a man I didn't recognize. He was older, maybe 60, wearing a dark suit and glasses. He looked like a lawyer. Please sit down, Ava said, pointing to a chair. I sat, my legs feeling like jelly. Everyone looked at me with an intensity that made me want to run. We received the results of the baby's DNA analysis, Ava said, her words dropping like stones into still water. DNA. I didn't understand why they had done that. What were they looking for? I asked when the silence became unbearable. Ava exchanged a look with the man in the suit. He nodded, opened a folder, and pulled out several printed sheets, placing them in front of me. The baby is a boy. He was born approximately 3 days ago, according to medical exams. Ava paused. And Ellie, he is your grandson. The world stopped. The words made no sense. I heard them, but my brain refused to process them. My grandson?
Impossible.
Marcus had died 8 months ago. He didn't leave any children. No pregnancy, nothing. That's impossible, I whispered. The results are conclusive, the man in the suit said. I'm Dr. Ernest Sato, a specialist in forensic genetics. We ran the test twice to be sure. The baby shares approximately 25% of his DNA with you. He is definitively your biological grandson, Marcus' son. Marcus' son? My Marcus. I felt like I'd been hit in the chest with a hammer. Marcus had a son he never knew. A son someone had tried to drown in a lake. But how? My voice sounded distant. Marcus died 8 months ago. Sloane never said anything about a pregnancy. Exactly, Ava said, leaning forward. Sloane was pregnant at the time of the accident. According to our calculations, she conceived about a month before Marcus' death, which means she knew. The room was spinning. Sloane knew she was pregnant when Marcus died. Why didn't she say anything? Why did she hide the pregnancy for 9 months? Why did she give birth in secret and then try to kill her own child? I don't understand, I said, tears starting to blur my vision. Why would she do that? He's her son, Marcus's son. That's what we have to find out, Ava said. But there's more, Ellie. I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. I braced myself. I didn't know for what, but I knew what was coming would be worse. We've been investigating your son's accident, and there are inconsistencies, major inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? Marcus' car was examined after the accident. The official report said it was a skid due to rain, but we requested a new review. They found evidence of manipulation in the brakes. Someone sabotaged them. The word dropped like a bomb. Sabotage. Murder. My son hadn't died in an accident. He had been murdered. Sloane, I said, it wasn't a question. She's our primary suspect, Ava admitted. But we need proof and we need to find her. She's completely disappeared. She hasn't used her phone. She hasn't touched her bank accounts. It's like she vanished into thin air. I got up from the chair. I needed to move, I needed air. I walked to the window. Outside the city glittered with millions of lights. Normal life. Normal people. While I was trapped in this nightmare. My son? I whispered against the glass. My baby. She killed him. No one responded. There was nothing to say. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Marcy. There's one more thing you need to know, she said softly. About the baby, about his future. I turned around. Her eyes were kind but sad. Given that the baby is your biological grandson, you have legal rights. You can apply for custody. She held up a hand before I could speak. It will be a long process. There will be evaluations, home visits, and psychological interviews. And in the meantime, the baby will remain in state care. No. The word came out as a roar. You're not going to take him from me. He's all I have left of Marcus. He's my grandson, my blood. I understand, Marcy said. Believe me, I do. But the system has protocols, and after everything that happened, we have to make sure the baby is safe. He'll be safer with me than with any stranger, perhaps. But that decision is not up to me. It's up to a judge and what's best for the child. Dr. Sato spoke for the first time since his initial revelation. There's another factor we must consider. The baby suffered severe trauma, hypothermia, near drowning. The next few weeks will be critical for his development. He will need specialized care, therapy, constant medical monitoring. I'll do whatever it takes, I said. Whatever. Ava stood up. Ellie, I need you to understand one thing. You are not a suspect. We believe your story, But you also can't simply keep the baby because he's your grandson. There is a legal process. And in the meantime, our priority is finding Sloan. We need your help. How? Think Sloan. Did she ever mention any special place, any property, any friend or relative she might be hiding with? I closed my eyes. I thought about all the conversations I'd had with Sloan during the 3 years she was married to Marcus. They were few and superficial. She never talked about her family. She never mentioned her past. It was as if she had sprung from nowhere the day she met Marcus. She has an aunt, I suddenly said. Up north near the border. Marcus mentioned it once. He said Sloan grew up with her in a place called Tucson. Ava quickly wrote it down. Name? I don't know. Marcus never said. It's a start, Ava said. We'll investigate. Everyone left except Diane. She stayed with me in that cold, empty conference room. Do you want to see your grandson? She asked. I nodded, unable to speak. She led me through security doors to the NICU. She made me wash my hands, put on a sterile gown, then guided me to an incubator in the corner. And there he was, my grandson, Marcus's son. So small, so fragile, connected to tubes and wires, but alive, breathing, fighting. He had Marcus's dark hair, Marcus's nose, Marcus' long fingers. Can I touch him? I whispered. Yes, just be gentle. I extended my hand through the opening in the incubator and touched his tiny hand. It was so soft, so warm. His small fingers closed around my index finger, a reflex, but it felt like a promise. Hello, little one, I whispered. I'm your grandma, and I promise I'm going to protect you. No one will ever hurt you again. I swear it on your father's memory. Diane put her hand on my shoulder. He needs a name, she said softly, for the hospital records until we find the mother or until a judge decides on a name. Marcus had wanted to name his first son Elijah, after my father. He told me once during a Christmas dinner, if I have a son, I'll call him Elijah. Elijah, I said. His name is Elijah. I stayed there all night, sitting next to the incubator, holding his hand, singing him the songs I used to sing to Marcus, promising him a future I didn't know if I could give him, but promising it anyway. Because now I knew the truth. This baby was not a stranger I had found by chance. He was my blood, my family, all that was left of my murdered son. And I wasn't going to let anyone take him away from me. Not the system, not Sloan, nobody. The following days were a bureaucratic nightmare. I woke up every morning at 5, showered, dressed, and drove to the hospital, spending the day next to Elijah's incubator. In the afternoon, the visits began. Lawyers, social workers, police, all with folders, all with questions, all deciding if I was good enough to raise my own grandson. Marcy showed up on the third day with a list of requirements, reading it in a monotonous voice, as if reciting an appliance manual. You will need a criminal background check, a complete psychological evaluation, a medical exam, income verification, a home inspection, personal references from at least 3 non-family members, and you have to complete a 40-hour childcare course. 40 hours, as if I hadn't raised a child to adulthood, as if I didn't know how to change a diaper or mix formula. But I didn't say anything. I just nodded and took the paper she handed me. How long will all this take? I asked. If you're lucky, 6 weeks, if not 3 months. 3 months. Elijah would be in foster care for 3 months while I jumped through bureaucratic hoops to prove I deserved to raise him. And what about him in the meantime? When he's released from the hospital, he will go to a certified temporary foster family. He will receive proper care. You will be allowed to visit him twice a week under supervision. Twice a week under supervision, as if I were a threat, as if I wasn't the person who saved him from drowning. That night I called Reverend Thomas. I needed references. I needed people to say I wasn't crazy, that I was capable, that I could do this. He came to my house the next day, sitting in my kitchen drinking the same tea I used to make for Marcus when he was a child. Of course I'll help you, he said. You're one of the strongest women I know. This child is lucky to have you. But I didn't feel strong. I felt old, tired, scared. I was 63 years old. How was I going to chase a 2-year-old when I was 65? How was I going to help him with homework when I was 70? How would I be at his graduation if I made it to 80? I'm too old for this, I said out loud for the first time. Reverend Thomas looked at me over his cup. Sarah was 90 when she gave birth to Isaac. Age is just a number when there's love involved. I wanted to believe him, I really did. On the fourth day, Diane taught me how to care for Elijah, how to support his tiny head, how to change his miniature diapers, how to prepare the formula to the exact temperature. My hands trembled at first. I had forgotten how fragile newborns are, how dependent, how terrifyingly delicate. You're doing great, Diane said every time I panicked. But it didn't feel great. Felt like walking on thin ice. One false move and everything would crash down. On the fifth day, Ava returned with news. We found Sloane's aunt, she said. She lives in a small town 60 miles from the border near Tucson. We went to interview her, and she says she hasn't seen Sloane in 2 years. She says they had a fight. Sloane owed her money, $3,000. Money. It always came back to money with Sloane. Marcus earned a good salary as an engineer, $7,000 a month. He had savings. He had a $200,000 life insurance policy. Sloane was the beneficiary. Did she receive the insurance? I asked. Ava nodded. 4 months ago, $200,000 deposited into her account. 2 weeks later, she transferred everything to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. We're trying to trace it, but it's complicated. $200,000, the value of my son's life. And she had hidden it in some tax haven while planning to kill his baby. Why? I asked the question that tormented me every night. Why kill the baby? She could have given him up for adoption. She could have left him at a hospital. Why try to drown him? Ava was silent for a long moment. We have a theory, she finally said. We were looking into Marcus' finances. We found something interesting. 2 weeks before he died, he changed his will. He left everything to his future children, not to Sloane, to his children. The air left my lungs. Marcus knew. Somehow he knew Sloane was pregnant, and he changed his will to protect his son. She killed him for money, I whispered. We believe so. And then she discovered the money would go to the baby if he was born alive, so she decided to eliminate him too. The pure malice of it left me speechless. She had killed my son. She had carried the pregnancy to term. She had given birth alone. And then she had tried to drown her own baby, all for money. Do you have enough to arrest her? When we find her, yes, but she's still missing. She's smart. She knows we're looking for her. Days turned into weeks. Elijah grew stronger. The doctors removed the tubes one by one. He started breathing on his own, feeding on his own, crying with strong, healthy lungs. It was a medical miracle. According to the doctors, no baby who had gone through what he had should be progressing so well. But I knew it was more than medicine. It was willpower. It was Marcus' spirit living in that tiny body, fighting, surviving, refusing to give up. I completed all the requirements. The background check came back clean. The medical exam showed I was healthy for my age. The psychological evaluation was the hardest. A young woman with glasses asked me questions for 3 hours. How did you cope with your son's death? How do you feel about Sloane? Are you trying to replace Marcus with this baby? That last question stung. I'm not replacing anyone, I said. I'm saving my grandson. It's different. She wrote something down. I didn't know if it was good or bad. The home inspection was humiliating. 2 women checked every corner. They opened closets, checked the refrigerator, measured the windows to see if they were secure. They counted the smoke detectors. They asked about my emergency fire plan. You'll need a certified crib, a changing table, safety gates on all stairways, cabinet locks, outlet covers. I spent $800 I didn't have on baby stuff. My pension barely covered my basic expenses. I had to use my savings, but I didn't care. Elijah was worth it. The childcare course was the worst. 15 young mothers and me. They all looked at me as if I were the confused grandmother who had wandered into the wrong class. The instructor was 25. She explained things I already knew with insulting slowness. Babies need to eat every 3 hours. Babies cry when they're hungry or wet. Never shake a baby. I nodded and took notes, even though I wanted to scream that I had raised a child to adulthood, that I knew exactly what I was doing. But I needed that certificate, so I swallowed my pride and pretended to learn. 6 weeks after finding Elijah in the lake, Marcy showed up at the hospital with a small smile. "You've completed all the requirements," she said. "The judge will review your case next week. If all goes well, you could have temporary custody in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. After 42 days of bureaucratic hell, I could finally take my grandson home. But that same night, when everything seemed to be improving, my phone rang. It was Ava. Her voice was tense. "Ellie, I need you to come to the precinct now. We found something about Marcus you need to see." I arrived at the precinct with a knot in my stomach. Ava was waiting for me at the entrance. Her face was more serious than usual. She led me down narrow hallways to an interrogation room. On the table was a cardboard box. Inside, I recognized Marcus' belongings. His wallet, his watch, his broken phone, the things they gave me back after the accident. "What is this?" I asked. "We finally managed to unlock his phone," Ava said. "Our technician worked on it for weeks and we found something." She took out a manila envelope, opened it, and spread several printed sheets on the table. There were screenshots of text messages between Marcus and Sloan dated 2 weeks before his death. I read the first one. It was from Marcus to Sloan. "We need to talk. Found out about the baby." Sloan's response: "I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus again: "I found the pregnancy test in the bathroom. Why didn't you tell me?" A 3-hour silence, then Sloan: "I wasn't ready to tell you. I was scared." Marcus: "Scared of what? I'm your husband. We're going to be parents. This is wonderful." Another silence, then: "I don't want to have it. I want to travel, live, not be tied down to a baby." Marcus: "It's our son. It's not a mistake. Don't say that, please. We can make it work. I'll help you. My mother will help us." Sloan: "I don't want help. I want my life back." The messages became more intense, Marcus pleading, Sloan resisting, until I reached the last exchange, the day before the accident. Marcus: "Sloan, I spoke with a lawyer. If you decide not to have the baby, I'm divorcing you. And if you have it and don't want to raise it, I'll fight for full custody. I'm not going to let you hurt my son." Sloan: "Marcus, you're going to regret this." Marcus: "Is that a threat?" There was no reply. The next day Marcus was dead. I let the papers fall. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. "She killed him," I said. "She killed him because he was going to protect the baby." "That's what we believe," Ava said. "And there's more." We checked Sloan's phone records from that week. She made 3 calls to an independent mechanic, Calvin Jones. We brought him in for questioning. And what did he say? Nothing at first, but when we showed him evidence of the bank transfer Sloan made to him, $2,000 the day before the accident, he started talking. He admitted she paid him to sabotage Marcus' car brakes. I felt sick. I had to sit down. Sloan had planned everything. She had hired someone to kill my son and made it look like an accident. Why would Calvin do something like that? Debts. He gambled. He owed $15,000 to dangerous people. Sloan offered him $2,000 right away and $3,000 more later. He took it. He's arrested now as an accomplice to murder. And Sloan, we have a warrant for her arrest for first-degree murder and attempted homicide, but we still haven't found her. She's like a ghost. I sat in that cold room processing everything. My son had died trying to protect his baby, and that baby was now in the hospital fighting for his life because his own mother had tried to kill him too. The cruelty of it all was unbearable. What happens now? I asked. We keep looking. We have her photo at every airport, every border crossing. Alerts at hospitals in case she tries to change her appearance. Someone will recognize her eventually. No one disappears forever. But I wasn't so sure. Sloan had proven to be smarter and colder than I ever imagined. If she had planned Marcus' murder in such detail, she probably had an equally elaborate escape plan. I went back to the hospital that night. I sat beside Elijah's incubator. I watched him sleep so innocent, so oblivious to the horror surrounding him. His very existence had cost his father his life. His mother had tried to kill him, and I was all that stood between him and a system that would see him as just another file. "Your daddy loved you," I whispered to him. "He died protecting you. I'm going to finish what he started. Promise." Diane showed up with coffee. She sat next to me in silence for a while. "I heard about the messages," she finally said. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know Marcus could be so strong," I said. "He was always gentle, kind-hearted. But in those messages he was a warrior, ready to fight for his son." "Love does that," she said. "It makes you stronger than you ever thought possible." She was right. I was feeling it myself. I never considered myself particularly strong, but now I was fighting the system, fighting against time, fighting against a fugitive killer, all for this baby. The following days were about preparation. I converted Marcus' room into a room for Elijah. I took down the rock band posters, the football trophies, the college photos, and painted the walls a soft yellow. I assembled the new crib, the changing table, the musical mobile that played lullabies. It was painful to dismantle my son's sanctuary, but it was necessary. Marcus was gone. Elijah was alive, and he needed a space to grow. Reverend Thomas came to bless the room. He sprinkled holy water in the corners and prayed for Elijah's protection, for my strength, for justice for Marcus. "God has a plan," he said, "even if we don't always understand it." "What kind of plan involves killing a good man and nearly drowning a baby?" I asked bitterly. "The kind of plan that turns evil into redemption. Sloan wanted to destroy this family, but look, Marcus left a legacy. You found a new purpose. This baby survived against all odds. Evil didn't win. Love won." I wanted to believe him. Some days I could. Other days all I saw was darkness. The court hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday. I wore my best suit, the same one I wore to Marcus's funeral. Marcy came with me. We walked into a small courtroom. The judge was a woman in her 50s. Her gray hair was pulled back, and she had a severe expression, but not without a hint of kindness. She carefully looked over all my documents, the certificates, the references, the evaluations, the home inspection report. She read every single page with meticulous attention. Finally she looked up. "Miss Whitlock," she said, "I have reviewed your case very carefully. It is highly unusual for a woman of 63 to apply for custody of a newborn. However, it is also quite unusual for a grandmother to save her grandson from drowning." My heart pounded so hard. I was sure everyone in the courtroom could hear it. "I have spoken with the hospital staff, with the social workers, with your references, and they all say the same thing. That you are dedicated, loving, and capable, and that this baby was lucky you were there that day." Tears started to well up in my eyes, but I held them back. "I have also read about the criminal case, about the suspicion that the baby's mother murdered the father, and then tried to kill the baby. It is horrific, unthinkable. This child needs stability. He needs love. He needs someone to protect him." A long, seemingly endless pause followed. "Therefore," she continued, "I am granting temporary custody to Layla Whitlock for a period of 6 months. During that time there will be monthly visits from Child Protective Services, progress evaluations, and at the end of the 6 months, we will review whether custody becomes permanent." "Congratulations, Grandma." The gavel struck, and I could suddenly breathe again. I cried right there in the courtroom, from relief, from gratitude, from fear, from everything. Marcy hugged me tightly. "You did it," she whispered in my ear. "Against all odds, you did it. You get to take him home." 3 days later, 6 weeks after pulling him from the lake, I took Elijah home. Diane helped me buckle him into the car seat, carefully explaining everything again. She went over how to hold him, how to feed him, how to notice any signs of trouble. "He's going to be fine," she reassured me. "And I'm just a phone call away if you need me." I drove home at a snail's pace, only 12 miles per hour. Every bump in the road terrified me. Every car that slowly passed my house made me nervous. But we arrived safely. I walked into the house with Elijah cradled in my arms, took him to his room, and gently placed him in his crib. He looked so tiny in that space, so vulnerable. But he was breathing, he was alive, and he was safe, at least for now. The first few weeks with Elijah at home were the hardest weeks of my life. I had completely forgotten how exhausting it is to care for a newborn baby. The sleepless nights blurred together. The inexplicable crying jangled my nerves. The constant panic that I was somehow doing something wrong gnawed at me. When I was 30, I had raised Marcus with boundless youthful energy. Now at 63, every sleepless night left me feeling utterly shattered and depleted. But there were also these extraordinary moments of pure magic, like when Elijah would grasp my finger with his tiny hand, or when he stopped crying at the sound of my voice, or when he opened those small dark eyes so incredibly like Marcus's, and looked at me as if I were his entire world. In those moments I knew that every single second of exhaustion was absolutely worth it. Diane came over 3 times a week, teaching me tricks I had long forgotten, like how to burp him more easily, how to swaddle him tightly so he would sleep better, how to interpret his different cries. She quickly became more than just a nurse. She became a true friend, a lifesaver in every sense of the word. "You're doing an incredible job," she always told me. But I never felt incredible. In truth, I felt constantly terrified. Every strange noise in the night made me jump out of my skin. Every car that passed my house slowly filled me with anxiety. Sloane was still out there somewhere on the loose. And even though the police assured me that she had probably fled the country, I simply couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was close, watching, waiting for her opportunity. I immediately installed new deadbolts on all the doors, high-tech security cameras on the porch, and a state-of-the-art alarm system connected directly to the police. I spent another $800 that I really didn't have. But Elijah's safety and well-being were priceless, worth any amount of money. Then one night, about 3 weeks after bringing him home, I stumbled upon something completely unexpected. I was organizing Marcus's things that I had stored away in boxes: his clothes, his books, his papers. At the very bottom of one of the boxes, I found a worn brown leather journal. I had no idea Marcus had even kept a journal. I opened it with trembling hands, my heart pounding in my chest. The first few pages contained entries from years ago, random thoughts about his work, about his friends, nothing of any real importance. But then I got to the entries from the last year, the year he met Sloane. "I met someone today," read an entry from 4 years ago. "Her name is Sloane. She's beautiful, smart, mysterious. There's something about her I can't quite figure out. She intrigues me." I kept reading, completely engrossed. The entries about Sloane became more and more frequent as the days went by. Marcus was clearly in love, completely captivated by her. But there were also lurking doubts. "Sometimes I feel like I don't really know her," he wrote. "She never talks about her family. When I ask, she always changes the subject. It's like her life only began the day we met." Another entry read, "I caught Sloane looking through my bank statements. She said she was just curious, but something felt wrong. Why would she look at that without asking first?" And then there was the one that chilled me to the bone, dated just 1 month before his death. "Sloane is pregnant." I found the test, but when I confronted her about it, she became absolutely furious. She said she doesn't want to have it, that it will completely ruin her life. How can she even say that? "It's our son. I changed my will today," he continued. "Everything goes to the baby. I don't trust Sloane with the money. Not after seeing how she spends it. $500 shoes, $1,000 bags. She always wants more. But a baby is not an accessory. It's a life. And I'm going to protect it at all costs." The very last entry was from the day he died. "Sloane threatened me today," he wrote. "She said I would deeply regret pressuring her about the baby. I don't know what that means, but it scares me. I'm going to talk to Mom tomorrow. Tell her everything. Maybe she can help me figure out what to do. I just know I can't let Sloane hurt our son. I will protect him always." He never had the chance to talk to me. He died that night, and I never knew that he needed my help, that he was scared, that he had somehow seen the danger approaching, but not quite fast enough to escape it. "I'm so sorry," I whispered to the journal, my voice choked with tears. "I am so sorry, my love. I should have known. I should have seen that something was terribly wrong. But I can't change the past. I can only protect the future." I took the journal to Ava the very next day. She read every single word, her jaw tightening with each and every page. "This is crucial evidence, PA," she said, her voice grim. "It clearly shows premeditation. It shows motive. When we finally find Sloane, this will bury her." "When are you actually going to find her?" I asked, my voice laced with frustration. "It's been almost 2 months already." "We're doing absolutely everything we can," she replied. "But she's smart, very smart. She probably used fake documents to leave the country. She could literally be anywhere." But then just 3 days later, everything changed in an instant. I was feeding Elijah when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't even bother to answer, but something deep inside me made me pick it up. "Hello," I said, my voice trembling slightly. Silence, just heavy breathing. Then a voice I instantly recognized. "Elliot Sloane." My blood ran ice cold in my veins. I almost dropped Elijah. I frantically looked around the room as if she might be hiding in the shadows, waiting to pounce. "Where are you?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "It doesn't matter where I am," she said, her voice hard and cold. "What really matters is that I have something you desperately want, and you also have something I want." "I don't have anything you want," I retorted, my mind racing. "I have the truth about what really happened to Marcus, about why I did what I did. I bet you really want to know." "I already know the truth," I spat back. "I read Marcus's journal. I know you killed him for the money." "A monster," she said, followed by a cold, humorless laugh. "How incredibly dramatic. You don't know anything, Ellie. Marcus wasn't the saint you think he was." "Don't you dare," I roared, my voice filled with rage. "Don't you ever dare speak ill of my son." Fine, she conceded. "You're going to call the police now, right? Go ahead. By the time you hang up this call, I'll be long gone. I only use burner phones. I'm not stupid." My mind raced, trying to find a solution. I had to keep her talking, that was the only way. I had to record this somehow. I quickly put the phone on speaker with one hand, grabbed my cell with the other, and started recording. "What do you want, Sloane?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "I want my son," she replied without hesitation. "Your son?" I scoffed. "You tried to drown him." "It was a mistake," she said, her voice softening slightly. "A moment of madness. I was scared, I was confused. I had just given birth all alone. I didn't know what I was doing. But I'm better now. I want my baby back." "Never," I said firmly. "Over my dead body." "That can certainly be arranged," she said with chilling calmness. "Listen very closely. I want Elijah. And I want Marcus's will money, the $200,000 from the insurance plus everything Marcus left in a fund for the baby. That's another $300,000. $500,000 total. $500,000. Everything Marcus had worked for, everything he had saved, all meant for his precious son. And if I refuse," I asked, my voice shaking slightly, "then I'll come looking for him," she threatened. "I'm his biological mother. Legally, I have more rights than you do. And when they finally catch me, I'll just say that you stole my baby, that you threatened me, that you made up the whole Lake story just to keep him. My word against yours. And I'm much younger, more credible, much more sympathetic." I felt dizzy, but I had to keep recording no matter what. "How do I even know you won't just kill both of us and take everything anyway?" I asked, my voice laced with suspicion. "You don't," she said bluntly. "But it's really your only option. Bring the baby and the money to the old boathouse by the lake. You know, the one where you and Marcus used to go fishing. Tomorrow at midnight, alone. If I see any cops, I immediately disappear, and you'll never see me again. And eventually, I'll find a way to take Elijah from you anyway." "Sloane, wait," I pleaded, but the line was already dead. I stood there, trembling uncontrollably, with Elijah cradled in one arm and the phone clutched tightly in the other. I had the recording. I had solid evidence that Sloane was alive, that she had threatened me. I immediately called Ava and sent her the audio file. "Perfect," she exclaimed. "It's exactly what we needed. Now we're going to set a trap for her. You go to that meeting, but we'll be there hidden waiting, and when she shows up we'll grab her." "But what if something goes wrong?" I asked, my voice filled with anxiety. "What if she sees the police and runs again?" "She won't see us," Ava reassured me. "Promise. I'll have snipers carefully positioned, teams hidden in the shadows. She won't get away this time." "And Elijah?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Elijah stays with Diane in a safe place. You're not taking him. You're just pretending to bring him." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. One more day, that was all I needed to survive. One more day, and then Sloane would finally face justice for Marcus, for Elijah, for all the unimaginable pain she had caused. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stayed awake watching Elijah sleep peacefully, carefully memorizing every detail of his tiny face, just in case something went terribly wrong. Just in case I never got to see him again. "Your daddy loved you so much," I whispered to him, my voice thick with emotion. "And I love you even more. And tomorrow we're going to make absolutely sure that you are safe forever." The next day passed in what felt like agonizing slow motion. Every single minute stretched out like an hour, every hour felt like an eternity. At 9 in the morning, Diane came to get Elijah. I packed his bag as if he were going to be gone for an entire week, even though I desperately hoped to have him back in just a few hours. Diapers, formula, extra clothes, his favorite soft blanket. My hands shook uncontrollably as I placed each item carefully in the bag. "He'll be perfectly fine with me," Diane said gently, taking Elijah into her arms. "I have your number, and the police have my address. No one is going to touch him, I promise." I kissed Diane on the forehead. Then I kissed Elijah. His soft skin smelled of baby lotion and pure hope. "I love you, little one," I whispered in his ear. "Grandma will be back very soon." I watched them leave. Diane's car disappeared down the street, and I felt as if a piece of my very soul was being torn away from me, but it was absolutely necessary. Elijah had to be far away, safe and sound, just in case things went terribly wrong. Ava arrived at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with 3 other officers, 2 men and a woman, all in plain clothes and all heavily armed. They quickly turned my living room into a makeshift command center, complete with laptops, radios, and detailed maps of the area surrounding the boathouse. "Let's go over the plan one more time," Ava said, spreading a large map out on my dining room table. "The boathouse is right here. It's been abandoned for 5 years. It has 3 entrances. A main door, a side door, and a rear door. We'll have teams carefully covering all 3. She pointed to specific locations on the map with a bright red marker. "We'll have snipers here and here, on the roofs of the adjacent buildings. They'll have a clear view of the interior through the broken windows. The assault team will be back here, ready to enter the moment we have visual confirmation of Sloane." "And what exactly am I supposed to do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, even though I was terrified inside. "You go in, you talk to her, you keep her talking," Ava explained. "We need her to confess, to openly admit that she killed Marcus, to admit that she tried to kill Elijah. You'll be wearing a hidden microphone, so we'll be able to record absolutely everything." One of the officers, a tall man in his 30s, took out a small button-sized device. "This goes on your clothes right here," he said, pointing to a spot just below my collarbone. "It transmits everything in real time. It also has a panic button. If you press it 3 times in a row, we enter immediately no matter what." He showed me exactly how it worked. I practiced pressing it 3 quick taps. My life would depend on remembering that. "And if she asks to see the baby, you tell her that he's in the car, that you want to talk first, that you desperately want to understand why she did what she did." Appealed to her enormous ego. People like Sloane absolutely love to talk about themselves. Let her boast about how smart she thought she was. We spent the next few hours meticulously reviewing every single detail, Every possible scenario: what to do if Sloane was armed, what to do if she wasn't alone, what to do if something went terribly wrong. My head was absolutely spinning with all the information. At 8 o'clock that night, they made me eat a ham sandwich that tasted like dry cardboard, but I swallowed every single bite. I desperately needed the energy. I needed to be alert and focused. At 10 o'clock, they carefully put the microphone on me and tested the audio repeatedly, making me say phrases, count to 10, shout and whisper, just to make absolutely sure that everything worked perfectly. "Remember," Ava said, looking me directly in the eyes, "you are not going to be alone in there. I will be listening to every single word you say. The team will be just feet away. At the very slightest sign of any real danger, we go in immediately. I won't let anything happen to you." I nodded, desperately wanting to believe her, but fear was a cold, constricting snake coiled tightly in my stomach. At 11:15 that night, we finally left. I drove my own car, with Ava crouched down in the passenger seat so as not to be seen from outside. "The other teams are already in position," she informed me over the radio. "Snipers in position. Rear team ready, perimeter secured." We arrived at the boathouse at 11:40. It was exactly as I remembered it. Old, dilapidated, broken windows and walls covered in graffiti. Marcus and I used to come here all the time when he was just a boy. We'd spend hours fishing off the dock behind it. Simpler times, happier times. Ava quickly got out of the car in a blind spot, well out of sight from Sloane's imaginary cameras. She disappeared silently into the shadows, leaving me completely alone. I looked at the clock, 11:55. 5 minutes. I closed my eyes, trying to gather my thoughts. I thought about Marcus, about his warm smile, about the way he called me Mama, in that loving tone, about what it would have been like to see him as a father. I thought about Elijah, about his future, about all the wonderful things he deserved to have in his life. A life without fear, without threats, without shadows. Midnight. My phone suddenly vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. "Go in alone now." I slowly got out of the car. The night air was bitterly cold, and I could actually see my breath. I walked slowly toward the boathouse's main door. Every single step sounded far too loud in the deafening silence. The door was slightly ajar, so I gently pushed it open. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the empty walls. Inside it was dark, almost completely black. Only a sliver of moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting strange, eerie shadows across the room. "Sloane!" I called out, my voice sounding small and scared. "Close the door," a voice said from the shadows, Sloane's voice. I closed the door, and my eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness. And then I saw her, standing in the center of the boathouse. She was wearing dark clothes, black jeans and a hooded sweatshirt. She looked different, thinner, almost gaunt. Her hair was short, dyed blonde, but it was definitely her. "You came," she said, sounding almost surprised. "You said you wanted to talk," I replied. "I said I wanted my son and the money. Where are they?" "I want answers first," I said firmly. "I want to know why. Why did you kill Marcus? Why did you try to kill Elijah?" She laughed, that same cold, chilling sound I had heard on the phone. "Why do you think, Ellie? For the money, of course. Marcus was just a foolish romantic. He went on and on about love and family in the future. I wanted freedom. I wanted to travel, to really live, not be tied down to a house and a crying baby." "Then why did you marry him in the first place?" I asked, incredulous. "Because he was a successful engineer. He earned very well. He had savings. He had a life insurance policy. It was simply an investment. I was fully prepared to wait 5 years, divorce him, and take half of everything. But then I got pregnant, and that completely ruined my well-laid plans." Her words were like venom, dripping with malice. "You told him you didn't want the baby," I said, my voice rising with anger. "Of course I didn't want it," she sneered. "But Marcus became absolutely impossible. He changed his will, leaving everything to the baby. So I simply had to adapt. If Marcus died while I was pregnant, I'd get the insurance money, but the baby would inherit everything else. So, the solution was really quite simple: kill Marcus, have the baby, then kill him too, and keep everything. She was confessing everything, every single word recorded and transmitted. The police were listening intently, but I needed even more. You hired Calvin to sabotage the brakes on Marcus's car, I stated. An absolute bargain, considering I made $200,000 from the insurance money. The best investment of my entire life. And the baby, your own son, was just an obstacle. I asked, horrified. Nothing more, she replied coldly. I gave birth to him alone in a cabin that I rented with cash. No one even knew I was pregnant. I wore baggy clothes and avoided people at all costs. When he was finally born, I actually thought about just abandoning him somewhere. But then I remembered the lake where you and Marcus used to go. It seemed almost poetic to end everything right there, where your pathetic little family tradition started. I felt sick to my stomach, a wave of rage washing over me. I felt all the hatred in the world concentrated on the woman standing right in front of me. But you failed, I said, my voice shaking. I saved him. Yes, that was quite annoying, she admitted. But it doesn't really matter because now I'm going to finish the job. Where is Elijah? Ellie, I'm not giving him to you. It wasn't a question, it was a threat. And then I saw the weapon. She quickly pulled it from her sweatshirt, a small black handgun, pointed directly at my chest. Last chance, she said, her eyes glinting menacingly. Where is my son? I pressed the panic button 1, 2, 3 times. You're never going to touch him, I said, my voice filled with defiance. Her finger moved to the trigger. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. I saw the flash, I heard the deafening shot, and I felt something hot and burning hit my shoulder. I stumbled backward. And then the boathouse suddenly exploded into motion. Doors burst open, blinding lights flashed, and voices yelled, "Police! Drop the weapon! Get on the ground now!" I saw Sloane turn. I saw the guns all pointing directly at her. I saw that she was completely surrounded. And for a brief second I actually thought she was going to shoot again, that she was going to force them to kill her. But then she slowly lowered the weapon and let it drop to the floor. She raised her hands in the air, surrendering. 3 officers immediately tackled her, pinning her face down and handcuffing her. She was screaming insults and threats, but it didn't even matter anymore. She was finally arrested. It was finally over. Ava ran to me, kneeling by my side. "Ellie, stay with me," she said urgently. "I'm fine," I managed to say, even though the pain in my shoulder was almost unbearable. "You got her, right? Tell me you got her." "We got her," Ava confirmed. "It's all over now. Just stay still, the ambulance is already on its way." I closed my eyes. It was enough. It was finally over. I woke up in the hospital again, but this time it was completely different. This time I felt not despair, but overwhelming relief. A sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. My shoulder throbbed where the bullet had grazed the muscle, but thankfully it had missed the bone. "Lucky," the doctor had said. 1 inch to the left, and it would have hit your heart. Diane was sitting next to me holding Elijah. When I opened my eyes, she smiled warmly. "Look who's finally awake," she said, coming closer. "Someone has missed you a lot." I carefully took Elijah with my good arm, cradling him gently against my chest. He smelled of baby powder and hope. He started making small noises, those tiny sweet sounds that babies make when they are happy. "Hello, my love," I whispered in his ear. "Grandma's fine, everything's fine now." Ava showed up about an hour later, bringing flowers and a tired but triumphant smile. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like someone who's been shot," I said, "but incredibly alive." "What happened to Sloane?" I asked. "Arrested," Ava replied. "Charged with first-degree murder for Marcus, attempted homicide for Elijah, attempted homicide for you, plus a long laundry list of other crimes, conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice. She's going to spend the rest of her miserable life in prison, without any possibility of parole." The words were as sweet as honey. Justice. Finally. "The recording worked perfectly," Ava continued. "She confessed to absolutely everything. Her lawyer tried to plead coercion, claiming that you forced her to say those things, but the jury saw the whole video. They saw her pull the gun, they saw her shoot. They had absolutely no mercy. 30 minutes of deliberation, and she was found guilty on all counts. In the following months, I slowly began to recover. Physical therapy for my shoulder was painful and grueling, but absolutely necessary. Diane continued to come over and help with Elijah when I couldn't lift him with my injured arm. Reverend Thomas brought over homemade meals, and neighbors I barely even knew showed up with casseroles and kind words of support. "You're a true hero," said the lady from the house down the street. "What you did for that baby. Risking your own life like that." But I didn't feel like a hero at all. I just felt like a grandmother doing exactly what any grandmother would do, protecting her own. 2 months after Sloane's capture, I had another hearing with the judge. But this time it was completely different. This time the judge was actually smiling as she carefully reviewed the documents. "Miss Whitlock," she said, "I have reviewed all the reports from the last 6 months, the Child Protective Services visits, Elijah's medical evaluations, and the progress reports, and I must say that I am incredibly impressed." My heart beat faster in my chest. "Elijah is thriving in your care. He is reaching all his developmental milestones. He is healthy, happy, and incredibly loved, and you have proven yourself more than capable, despite all the challenges." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "Therefore," she continued, "I am granting full and permanent custody of Elijah to Layla Whitlock, effective immediately. Furthermore, given that the biological mother is incarcerated for life and has forfeited all parental rights, I authorize adoption proceedings if you wish to pursue them. Adoption to make him legally mine. Not just his grandmother with custody, but his legal mother." "Yes," I said without a moment's hesitation. "Yes, I want to adopt him. Then so it shall be officially. Congratulations." The gavel fell, and suddenly all the weight I had been carrying for months just lifted, vanished. It was official. Elijah was mine. No one could ever take him away again. I walked out of the courthouse with Elijah in my arms. He was 8 months old now, chunky and happy. He smiled, showing 2 tiny teeth. He laughed when I bounced him. He pulled my hair with his chubby little hands. Diane and Reverend Thomas were waiting for me outside. They hugged me tightly. All 3 of us cried tears of pure joy right there on the courthouse steps. "You did it," Diane said, her voice thick with emotion. "Against all odds, you did it." That night I made a special dinner, well, as special as it could be with a baby who needed constant attention. I invited Diane and Reverend Thomas to join us. We ate roast chicken and rice, a simple but comforting meal. We toasted with apple juice because none of us drank alcohol. "To Elijah," Reverend Thomas said, raising his glass high. "To his bright future." "To Marcus," I added, "who's watching us from somewhere, so proud of his son." "And to love," Diane finished, "which always conquers evil." We drank, we ate, we laughed. Elijah banged on his high chair and squealed with delight, not understanding the words, but definitely feeling the happiness that filled the room. Months turned into years, as they always do. Elijah grew so fast. He started walking. At 11 months, his first word was, "Nana." I cried the moment he said it, overcome with emotion. At 2, he was running all over the house, a whirlwind of energy. 3, he started preschool. Every milestone felt like a miracle. Every single day was a gift. I talked to him about Marcus constantly. I showed him photos, told him stories. "Your daddy was a good man," I would tell him. "So brave. He loved you even before he met you. He gave his life to protect you." "Daddy hero," Elijah would say in his sweet little voice. "Yes, my love. Daddy was a hero. And you'll grow up to be as good, as brave, as loving as he was." I never told him about Sloane, not yet. That would come later, when he was older, when he could truly understand. For now, he just needed to know that he was loved, that he was wanted, that there were people who had fought so hard for him. On Elijah's 5th birthday, we had a big party in the backyard. We invited all the neighborhood kids. There were balloons bobbing in the breeze, a big cake covered in frosting, and piles of presents. Elijah ran among his friends, laughing and carefree, so full of life. Such a stark contrast to the blue, still baby I had pulled from the lake 5 years ago. Diane sat next to me on the porch, watching the celebration unfold. "What are you thinking about?" she asked gently. "That day," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. How I could have been 5 minutes later. How I could have not looked out the window at that exact moment. How everything could have been so different. "But it wasn't," she countered, squeezing my hand. "You found him. You saved him. It was your destiny." "Or Marcus," I said, a lump forming in my throat. Sometimes I think he guided my eyes to the lake that day, that he somehow knew I would be there, that he could trust me to protect his son. "Perhaps," Diane said thoughtfully. "Or perhaps you're just an incredibly brave woman who refused to give up." That night, after everyone had left, after Elijah finally fell asleep, exhausted from all the excitement, I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by a comfortable silence. I looked at the photos on the wall. Marcus as a baby, Marcus at his graduation, Marcus on his wedding day. And next to them the new photos, Elijah newborn in the hospital, Elijah taking his first steps, Elijah on his first day of school. 2 generations connected by love, separated by tragedy, united by survival. "We did it, Marcus," I whispered to his photo, my heart full. "Your son is safe. He's happy. He's growing up strong and good just like you wanted." And although I knew he couldn't answer me, I felt something deep inside. A warmth, a peace, as if he were right there with me, proud, grateful, finally at rest. "Maybe you would have given up if you had been in my place. Maybe you would have thought you were too old, too tired, too broken. Or maybe you would have done exactly the same thing. Because that's what love does. It makes you stronger than you ever imagined possible. It makes you fight when everything seems lost. It makes you find hope in the deepest darkness. I don't know what the future holds, nobody ever does. I know there will be challenges, that's a given. I know there will be hard days. I know raising a child at my age won't be easy. But I also know that every day with Elijah is a precious gift. Every smile, every hug, every "I love you, Nana." When I look at him sleeping peacefully in his room, the room that was once his father's, I see not just a child but a promise, the promise I made to my son, the promise I made to myself that terrible day by the lake, the promise to protect, to love, to never give up no matter what. Some say it was luck that I was looking out the window at that exact moment. Others say it was fate, a preordained course. Maybe it was a little of both. Maybe it was Marcus guiding me from somewhere beyond our understanding. What I know for sure is that when I saw that suitcase sinking in the lake, when I heard that faint sound coming from inside, when I felt Elijah's tiny heart fighting to keep beating against my chest, I knew nothing would ever be the same. And you know what? I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the child sleeping soundly under my roof. I'm grateful for the chance to see Marcus's eyes again, reflected in his son's. To hear his laughter, in a way, echoing through the walls of this old house. I'm grateful for the opportunity to love again, to have a purpose again, to feel that despite everything I lost, I also gained something incredibly precious. Tragedy finds us all, eventually. Sooner or later, it knocks on our door when we least expect it. It snatches away the people we love, the dreams we cherished, the security we took for granted. But what do we do next? That is the question that defines who we are. I could have surrendered to grief when Marcus died. I could have shrunk in fear when I saw Sloane throw the suitcase into the lake. I could have told myself I was too old, too weak, too broken to be a mother again. Instead, I chose to fight. I chose to love. I chose to believe that even in the ashes of the deepest loss, something new can grow. And it did. His name is Elijah. Today he is 5 years old. Tomorrow he will be 6. And someday he will be 20, 30, 40, a complete man with his own dreams, his own loves, maybe even his own children. I don't know if I'll be here to see it all. Probably won't be. But I know I planted the seeds. I know I gave him strong roots and wings to fly. I know I told him about his father, about the love Marcus had for him even before he was born, about the courage it took to defend him. And that will have to be enough. Some nights, like this one, After the house falls silent and only the ticking of the old clock on the wall remains, I think about the woman I was before that day by the lake. The woman broken by grief, living among the ghosts of the past, letting the days pass without purpose or hope. I barely recognize her now because the woman I am today, the woman who chases a 5-year-old around the yard, who sticks stick figure drawings on the refrigerator, who kisses scraped knees and scares away monsters from under the bed. That woman is stronger than I ever imagined being. And it all started with the choice. The choice to run toward the lake instead of running away from it. The choice to open that wet suitcase even when my heart screamed with fear about what I might find. The choice to fight for the future when the past felt too heavy to carry. It wasn't an easy choice. It wasn't an easy journey, not by a long shot. There were days when my back ached so much from carrying a baby that I could barely stand. There were nights when the relentless crying left me on the verge of tears, feeling completely drained. There were moments when I wondered if I had made a mistake, if I was being selfish to think I could be a mother again at my age. But then Elijah would smile at me, his face lighting up like sunshine. He would say, "Nana," in that sweet, innocent voice. He would fall asleep in my arms, trusting me to keep him safe. And I knew deep in my soul that I hadn't made a mistake. I had done exactly what I was supposed to do. Ava and Diane are still very much a part of our lives. Ava stops by occasionally, bringing gifts for Elijah and checking on how we're doing, always supportive. Diane has become almost an aunt to him. She takes him to the park on Sundays, teaches him about birds and trees, gives him the extra love every child deserves. Reverend Thomas blesses our house every Christmas. He tells me Elijah is living proof that God works in mysterious ways, transforming tragedy into triumph, pain into purpose. And Sloane? She is serving her life sentence without the possibility of parole. She will never again be able to harm Elijah or anyone else. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about him, if she regrets what she did, if any spark of maternal love ever existed in that cold, dark heart of hers. But then I remember the look on her face when she threw that suitcase into the lake, that look of pure malice. And I know the answer. Some people are simply incapable of love. Sloane was one of them, unfortunately. She only cared about money, freedom, her own selfish desires. She saw Elijah as an obstacle, not the miracle he is. Her loss is most definitely my gain. Because every morning, I wake up to the sound of little feet running down the hall. My bedroom door bursts open and Elijah jumps into my bed, his dark hair messy from sleep, his eyes Marcus's eyes, shining with the promise of a brand new day. "Good morning, Nana," he shouts, throwing his little arms around me, squeezing me tight. And in that moment, all the pain, all the struggle, all the sacrifice is worth it. In that moment, I know I would do it all over again without hesitation. I would face Sloane again. I would take that shot again. I would fight the entire legal system just to have this child in my life. When people hear our story, they often say, "You're incredible, brave, extraordinary." But I don't feel that way at all. I just feel like a grandmother who did what any grandmother would do. Protect her grandson at any cost, no matter the odds. The true hero of this story is Marcus, who saw through Sloane's deceptive charm, who changed his will to protect his unborn son, who was willing to face a difficult custody battle to keep him safe. Marcus, who ultimately paid the ultimate price for his unwavering love. And the true miracle is Elijah, who survived against all odds, who fought for every single breath in those critical first hours, who brought the light back to this house that was once dark with grief and despair. As for me, I'm just the bridge between father and son, the guardian of their cherished memories, the protector of their shared future. And it is enough. It is more than enough. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.